Russian procurement agent needs avionics components. The bank route has closed. His company name has changed twice. The intermediary exists on paper in the Caucasus, which is often where suspicious paperwork goes to acquire a winter coat and a new passport. The invoice says, "Industrial Sensor Package," a phrase that has done more laundering than a motel washing machine. So the money finds another route. A stablecoin moves from one wallet to another, then passes through a broker whose controls have all the firmness of wet cardboard. Somewhere, a blockchain analytics firm sees the pattern. Somewhere else, a sanctions officer recognizes the service provider. An intelligence analyst begins connecting the transaction to a company, a shipper, and a procurement network that believed it had disappeared into the fog. That is where the story begins. The geopolitics of blockchain technology is no longer mainly about crypto speculation, libertarian slogans, or conference men explaining that banks are finished while standing beside a booth funded by a bank. The real subject is settlement. Who can move value? Who can stop it? Who can see it? Who can hide it long enough to buy what he is forbidden to buy? Every major power now has to treat blockchain as infrastructure. States care about financial choke points, sanctions enforcement, capital mobility, surveillance, cyber risk, and the legal status of assets moving across borders at software speed. The matter has moved beyond market mania into the machinery of power. The European Union's moves against Russia-linked crypto infrastructure show how much the ground has shifted. Western governments are no longer chasing isolated wallets as though each suspicious address were a little pirate island. They are beginning to treat crypto service providers, state-linked digital instruments, and blockchain payment rails as part of the sanctions battle space. The target is no longer a coin. The target is the system that lets value move around pressure. Blockchain has crossed the threshold from speculative finance into geopolitical infrastructure. In Washington, the debate has moved beyond whether crypto should be allowed to exist in some offshore bazaar where the lighting is bad and the legal opinions smell expensive. Congress, regulators, banks, exchanges, and Treasury officials are now fighting over market structure, custody, anti-money laundering rules, stablecoin reserves, tokenized securities, and supervisory authority. That fight may look domestic, but it is strategic. Regulation is how the United States turns a technology into an instrument of national power. The legal code is the part of the machine that wears a tie. Beijing sees the matter with less romance. China has tightened restrictions on private virtual currencies while preserving space for state-supervised digital finance. The message is plain enough. Blockchain may be useful. Private money is dangerous. Tokenization may serve industrial policy. Currency remains a throne. Beijing does not let random men in hoodies sit on thrones. Across the world, central banks are studying digital currencies because they understand that the future of money will not be left entirely to private platforms. Retail central bank digital currencies get attention because people enjoy arguing about surveillance and privacy. Wholesale systems may matter even more. Central banks are studying how institutional money moves across borders, across ledgers, across tokenized asset systems, and across allied financial architectures. The plumbing is being redesigned while much of the public is still yelling about coins with animal mascots. Here is the BLUF. Blockchain is becoming one of the control surfaces of 21st century power. The old financial order rested on banks, payment processors, correspondent accounts, clearinghouses, reserve currencies, legal identity systems, and the coercive power of states. That order has not vanished. Anyone who says it has is selling either a token or a newsletter, possibly from the same folding chair. Yet a new layer is forming beneath and around it. Stablecoins can move dollar claims across borders at software speed. Tokenized securities can change how assets are issued, traded, pledged, and settled. Central bank digital currencies can give states programmable money and tighter command over payment channels. Blockchain analytics can turn public ledgers into intelligence terrain. The decisive question is not whether blockchain will replace the state. It will not. The better question is which states will domesticate blockchain first, and which states will be forced to chase it from behind. To understand why blockchain became strategic infrastructure, start with the ledger. A blockchain is a ledger architecture. It records ownership, transfer, and state changes across a distributed network. That sounds dry because the technical definition has the social charisma of a parking permit. Yet in geopolitical terms, a ledger is never merely a record. A ledger is a map of trust. Every political order has had to answer the same basic questions. Ownership has to be recognized. Transfers have to count. Records have to be verified. Fraud has to be punished. Some transactions have to be reversed, censored, hidden, or exposed, depending on who holds authority and what that authority is trying to preserve. Medieval kingdoms answered through seals, courts, tax rolls, land grants, and coinage. Empires used customs houses, imperial banks, commercial charters, and controlled trade routes. Modern states use central banks, commercial banks, securities depositories, sanctions lists, tax authorities, payment networks, and legal identity systems. Blockchain enters this old problem with a new claim. The ledger can be maintained by a network rather than a single trusted authority. That is the technical novelty. It is also the political provocation. States care because blockchain changes the location of control. Traditional finance concentrates authority inside licensed firms. Banks perform identity checks. Payment processors screen transactions. Clearinghouses settle obligations. Central banks provide finality at the highest level. Regulators can pressure choke points because the system has recognizable choke points. Public blockchain systems complicate that structure. A ledger may be visible to everyone while control is scattered across miners, validators, protocol developers, wallet providers, stablecoin issuers, exchanges, bridges, custodians, and front-end interfaces. The base layer may look decentralized. The places where ordinary people touch the system are often surprisingly centralized. The basement may be full of libertarian machinery humming like a caffeinated beehive, but the front door still has a receptionist. Stablecoins show the problem clearly. A stablecoin is a digital token designed to track the value of another asset, most often the US dollar. In practice, a dollar-backed stablecoin functions as a transferable dollar claim on a blockchain. A user does not need a US bank account to hold the token. The token can move across borders, circulate on exchanges, sit in wallets, interact with decentralized finance protocols, and settle between counterparties who may never touch the banking system directly. That makes stablecoins geopolitically important. They can extend demand for dollars into places where dollar banking is restricted, expensive, unreliable, or politically sensitive. A trader in Turkey, a freelancer in Argentina, a firm in Nigeria, and a sanctioned intermediary in Central Asia may all use stablecoins for different reasons. One wants inflation protection. One wants payment speed. Another wants offshore liquidity. The more dangerous user wants to hide from sanctions. The same tool can serve the shopkeeper, the dissident, the speculator, and the procurement agent. Technology has a nasty habit of refusing moral specialization. For the United States, the puzzle is strange. Dollar-backed stablecoins may reinforce the dollar's global role by spreading dollar-denominated instruments through digital channels and increasing demand for treasury bills when issuers hold treasuries as reserves. At the same time, these tokens can weaken traditional oversight when they operate outside the banking perimeter. Poor reserves can create run risk. Loose controls can transmit illicit finance. Wide adoption can pressure banks by giving users a software-based alternative to deposits and cross-border payments. Washington faces a very American predicament. The private market may be extending dollar power faster than the state can regulate it. The empire discovers a machine in the garage, then asks whether the machine has filed the proper paperwork. Tokenization carries the logic further. To tokenize an asset is to represent a claim on a digital ledger. The claim might involve a treasury bill, a money market fund share, a corporate bond, real estate, a commodity, or collateral in a lending system. The public phrase, real-world assets, sounds bland. It is actually one of the more important battlefields in digital finance. In legacy markets, trading and settlement often remain separate. A trade can occur today while final settlement arrives later. That delay creates counterparty risk, operational cost, reconciliation burdens, and capital requirements. Shared ledgers could compress parts of that process. Assets might be issued, traded, pledged, and settled faster, with clearer audit trails and fewer reconciliation failures. That is the optimistic case. The strategic case is colder. Whoever controls tokenized market infrastructure may influence the future plumbing of capital formation. A tokenized treasury market could become a new channel for dollar liquidity. A tokenized bond market could lower barriers for some issuers while giving regulators stronger surveillance and enforcement tools. A tokenized collateral system could change how leverage moves through global markets. Once real assets become tokens, jurisdiction becomes the central question. A tokenized bond governed by New York law is one kind of instrument. A tokenized commodity claim issued through an offshore vehicle is another. A tokenized yuan instrument moving through Chinese trade corridors is something else entirely. A tokenized ruble instrument designed for sanctions evasion is a wetter, stranger animal with suspicious paperwork. The asset may be digital, but the jurisdiction is not. A ledger can be global while enforcement remains territorial. Tokens move at software speed, but the legal claim behind them still depends on courts, regulators, banks, custodians, auditors, and sometimes armed men who control ports. Blockchain also creates intelligence terrain. Public blockchains are peculiar things. They can be pseudonymous yet transparent. A wallet address does not automatically reveal a person's name, but every transaction may be visible forever. Once investigators link an address to a real-world actor, the past begins speaking. This is why blockchain analytics firms became so important. They cluster addresses, trace flows, identify exchanges, study mixers, locate ransomware wallets, map darknet markets, track sanctions evasion networks, and examine state-linked activity. The ledger becomes a battlefield chart. Another paradox appears. Criminals and sanctioned actors use crypto because it can bypass banks, while investigators use blockchain data because the ledger can preserve evidence with almost embarrassing discipline. Cash forgets. Blockchains gossip forever. For defense and intelligence communities, this is serious. Financial flows reveal networks. Procurement networks need payment. Ransomware groups need cash-out channels. Sanctioned regimes need settlement. Proxy groups need donors. Military suppliers need intermediaries. When blockchain rails touch those transactions, the ledger becomes part of the intelligence picture. An analyst may connect wallet behavior with corporate records, shipping data, domain registrations, social media signals, customs filings, exchange accounts, and communications metadata. The blockchain alone rarely tells the whole story. It gives a skeleton. Intelligence work adds muscle, organs, and sometimes a very ugly face. Programmability gives blockchain its next strategic quality. A conventional payment transfers value. A programmable payment can carry conditions. Smart contracts can release funds when terms are met, move collateral automatically, liquidate positions, distribute revenue, mint tokens, burn tokens, or enforce rules without a clerk standing in the path. That can reduce friction. It can also create fragility. In conventional finance, law and operations sit between intent and execution. A contract says what should happen. A bank, court, clearinghouse, administrator, or trustee may decide what happens when parties disagree or systems fail. In blockchain systems, some of those decisions move into code. Speed improves. Mercy often vanishes. A smart contract that executes a flawed rule will execute the flawed rule with magnificent obedience. Software does not look toward heaven and say, perhaps we should call Margaret from risk management. It simply executes. States see the power in that design. A central bank digital currency could support direct policy transmission, faster benefits delivery, better transaction monitoring, tighter capital controls, and cross-border settlement. A regulated stablecoin can include freezing functions, blacklist rules, transfer restrictions, and compliance interfaces. Tokenized markets can move collateral, revalue positions, and liquidate exposures much faster than old systems allow. Speed and order can improve together, though automation also creates new forms of fragility. A market full of self-executing contracts can start to resemble a room of mousetraps connected by fishing wire. Custody adds another layer. In traditional finance, custody is handled by banks, brokers, depositories, trustees, and regulated firms. In crypto, control often rests on private keys. Whoever controls the key controls the asset. For individuals, self-custody offers autonomy. In unstable countries, that can be useful. For dissidents, it can be protective. For criminals, it can be convenient. For ordinary people who lose a seed phrase, it becomes a lifelong spiritual exercise in regret. Institutions cannot manage digital assets like a teenager hiding tokens in a browser wallet called definitely_not_ taxable. They need key management, insurance, auditability, identity verification, recovery procedures, and compliance. Institutional custody turns crypto into financial infrastructure. Custody is also a national security issue. If digital asset infrastructure depends on foreign custodians, foreign cloud providers, foreign hardware, or foreign software supply chains, financial sovereignty becomes tangled with cyber sovereignty. A compromised custodian can lose assets. A sanctioned custodian can freeze access. A foreign-controlled platform can expose transaction data. A poorly secured wallet provider can become systemic risk. This is where blockchain meets cyber power. Private keys, exchanges, bridges, wallets, smart contracts, developers, validators, cloud environments, and operational tooling all become targets. The attack surface sprawls and it touches money directly. In ordinary cyber incidents, attackers may steal data or disrupt operations. In blockchain incidents, attackers often steal the asset itself. The vault and the payment rail share a nervous system. Every serious security officer should sit up straight and move his coffee away from the keyboard. Step back and the larger picture sharpens. Blockchain became strategic infrastructure because it touches money, markets, identity, surveillance, and sanctions. A state that ignores it risks losing visibility into value flows. A state that overreacts drives activity offshore. A state that captures the standards can turn blockchain into an extension of national power. Think of blockchain as a new kind of port system. Ports move goods. A port can make a city wealthy. It can also become a smuggling hub, an espionage node, a sanctions breach, or an invasion route. Blockchain networks move value and claims. They need wallets, exchanges, custodians, validators, bridges, auditors, analytics firms, regulators, courts, and cybersecurity controls. A blockchain ecosystem can deepen markets. It can also enable crime, evasion, capital flight, automated leverage, and jurisdictional conflict. No serious empire leaves ports unattended. No serious state will leave blockchain unattended either. The American position begins with irony. Crypto once looked like a rebellion against the dollar system. Bitcoin emerged from suspicion of central banks, commercial banks, bailouts, inflation, surveillance, and custodial finance. It offered a monetary asset outside state issuance. At least that was the dream. Then the market did something very human. It ran back to the dollar. Much of the crypto economy depends on dollar-denominated instruments. Traders price assets in dollars. Exchanges rely on dollar liquidity. Stablecoins serve as settlement media. The most important stablecoins are tied to the US dollar, not to gold, Bitcoin, the euro, the yuan, or whatever token a man in Miami launched after 3 coconut waters and 1 energetic panel discussion. The crypto market did not overthrow the dollar. It digitized demand for it. A dollar-backed stablecoin is simple in concept. A company issues digital tokens designed to stay equal to $1. In theory, each token is backed by reserves such as cash, bank deposits, treasury bills, or similar liquid assets. Users move those tokens across blockchain networks. This makes stablecoins one of the most important bridges between traditional finance and blockchain networks. They are private money-like instruments built on public or semi-public rails, which should make policymakers blink twice. The new variables are speed, reach, and programmability. A stablecoin can move across borders in minutes, operate around the clock, plug into decentralized finance, circulate in countries where local money is weak, and function as collateral, payment instrument, trading pair, or cash substitute. That makes it commercially useful and strategically consequential. The dollar's power rests on deep capital markets, treasury liquidity, legal predictability, global trade invoicing, energy markets, banking networks, reserve management, and the sheer difficulty of replacing a system that already works well enough for people who complain about it daily. Stablecoins add a new channel. They distribute dollar claims through software. From one angle, this looks like an American strategic gift. Private companies build the rails. Users around the world adopt dollar tokens. Treasury markets receive reserve demand. The dollar remains the reference asset of the digital economy. Washington gets a new layer of monetary reach without building a retail central bank digital currency. It is neat, almost elegant. That is usually when one should check for snakes in the machinery. All stablecoins create control gaps. If dollar-backed tokens circulate outside banks, compliance depends on a different set of actors. Issuers may freeze tokens, exchanges may screen users, wallet providers may build controls, analytics firms may trace flows. Still, the architecture differs from traditional banking. A bank knows its customer, files reports, blocks transfers, and sits inside a supervised legal cage. Sometimes gilded, sometimes dented, always watched. Blockchain tokens can move between self-custodied wallets, smart contracts, bridges, mixers, decentralized exchanges, and offshore platforms. Major issuers and exchanges remain choke points, but the path from issuance to use can be tangled. Washington wants dollar stablecoins strong enough to beat rival digital money, yet regulated enough to preserve sanctions power, consumer protection, financial stability, and law enforcement visibility. Weak rules can turn stablecoins into shadow banking with a blockchain accent. Excessive pressure can drive activity offshore. Well-designed regulation can turn stablecoins into a new pillar of American financial power. Think of the dollar system as a fortress with roads. The fortress includes central banks, commercial banks, treasury markets, clearinghouses, regulators, courts, sanctions authorities, and intelligence partnerships. The roads are the channels through which dollars move: correspondent banking, card networks, wire transfers, payment processors, offshore banking centers, money services businesses, and now stablecoin networks. For decades, the United States exercised power by influencing those roads. A bank that violates sanctions can be fined, pressured, cut off, investigated, or made into an example so memorable that every compliance officer in the world suddenly rediscovers religion. The threat of losing dollar access remains one of Washington's strongest tools. Stablecoins create new roads. Some lead back to U.S.-regulated issuers and custodians. Others run through offshore exchanges or decentralized protocols. Certain roads are paved by firms that want legitimacy. Others look like they were poured at midnight by men with burner phones. A regulated stablecoin system could preserve digital transfer while keeping issuers accountable. Reserve requirements can make tokens safer. Redemption rules can reduce run risk. Audits can improve trust. Sanctions screening duties can preserve enforcement. Custody standards can reduce theft. Cybersecurity requirements can harden the systems. In that model, dollar stablecoins become something like private digital eurodollars under tighter discipline. They extend the dollar's reach while remaining tied to American law. That would let the United States compete against foreign CBDC corridors without issuing a retail CBDC of its own. Crypto does not repeal financial history. It puts a hoodie on it and asks for venture funding. Stablecoins matter because they sit inside the larger architecture of dollar primacy. The dollar gives the United States borrowing advantages, sanctions leverage, intelligence visibility, regulatory reach, and influence over global finance. Rival states know this. Russia wants alternatives because sanctions made dollar dependence dangerous. China wants alternatives because a great power dislikes living inside another great power's monetary weather system. Iran, North Korea, and other sanctioned actors search for channels outside Western control. De-dollarization rhetoric often runs ahead of reality, but the desire is real. Blockchain enters this contest as both opportunity and threat. For U.S. rivals, it can provide alternative rails, support bilateral settlement, aid sanctions evasion, or carry tokenized assets outside Western platforms. For the United States, it can extend dollar dominance through stablecoins, tokenized treasuries, regulated markets, and analytics-driven enforcement. The technology is terrain. Terrain favors whoever maps it, occupies it, governs it, and builds roads through it. Tokenized treasuries may become one of the most important pieces of the American position. A tokenized treasury product represents exposure to U.S. government debt through a digital token or blockchain-based structure. For users in digital asset markets, that can provide yield, collateral, and settlement utility. For the United States, it deepens the role of treasuries inside blockchain ecosystems. Treasury bills already sit behind many stablecoin reserve models. If stablecoin issuers hold large amounts of short-term treasuries, global demand for stablecoins supports demand for U.S. government debt. That is a direct link between private digital money and sovereign financing. Washington can see the attraction. If the world wants digital dollars, and digital dollars require treasury reserves, blockchain becomes a new distribution channel for American debt instruments. The dollar system grows another limb, but the limb needs nerves. Tokenized treasuries issued under strong legal structures can strengthen financial architecture. Opaque offshore products can create confusion and systemic risk. A tokenized asset is not safer because it sits on a blockchain. The quality of the claim depends on issuer, custodian, legal structure, reserves, redemption rights, audits, cybersecurity, and oversight. A bad tokenized treasury is a costume. A good one is infrastructure. America also has an analytics advantage. Public blockchains create data. Data creates attribution opportunities. Attribution creates enforcement options. That chain of advantage is not automatic, but when the state has capable firms, investigators, and legal reach, the ledger becomes a sensing layer. When sanctioned actors use transparent ledgers, they expose patterns. They may obscure flows through mixers, bridges, and nested services, but every movement leaves traces. Wallet clusters can reveal counterparties. Exchange deposits can identify cash-out points. Timing patterns can connect events. Repeated counterparties can expose networks. Mistakes can open the door. A wallet address that means nothing today may mean everything next year. Once linked, its history does not politely vanish. The domestic political challenge is that America's greatest strength is also its greatest source of disorder. The country tolerates private capital, software experimentation, financial speculation, and entrepreneurial chaos at a level that makes older bureaucracies clutch the armrest. This produces fraud and discovery in equal measure. It produces marvels and disasters. It produces real technology and men in designer sneakers explaining community while checking the exit. That tolerance explains why many important digital asset companies, developers, venture funds, custodians, analytics firms, and infrastructure projects have American roots or American access. The question is whether the United States can convert messy private energy into governed strategic capability. Historically, America does this well when it chooses to. The Internet began as defense-linked research infrastructure and became a commercial platform with global reach. GPS began as military infrastructure and became a foundation of civilian life. Semiconductors grew through defense demand, commercial scaling, and allied supply chains. Space launch, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and cyber tools show the same pattern. Chaotic private enterprise, state funding, regulatory conflict, commercial dominance, and geopolitical leverage. Blockchain could follow that path. It could also escape it. If regulation remains incoherent, talent and capital can move. If the banking system refuses legitimate digital asset firms without risk distinctions, activity shifts offshore. If enforcement substitutes for legislation, firms build outside American reach. If policymakers treat every blockchain activity as either salvation or crime, the middle ground will be occupied by other countries with better paperwork and fewer speeches. The winning strategy is disciplined incorporation. Stablecoin reserves need clear rules. Custody needs strong standards. Major choke points need anti-money laundering controls. Cybersecurity has to mature. Tokenized dollar assets require legal support under U.S. law. Blockchain analytics should be folded into sanctions and law enforcement without turning the country into a domestic surveillance terrarium. That is the American path, if Washington wants one. It will not satisfy absolutists. Good. Absolutists are rarely useful around plumbing. China sees the problem differently. Beijing's blockchain strategy begins with a simple principle. Digital finance must serve the state. That does not mean China rejects the underlying technology. It rejects the political disorder that can come with private crypto markets. A public blockchain with self-custody, offshore liquidity, and privately issued dollar stablecoins looks, from Beijing's point of view, like a hole in the wall of monetary sovereignty. Money is command. Capital control is command. Payment visibility is command. A private token that lets people move value outside approved channels becomes more than a financial nuisance. It is an escape hatch. States built on tight monetary supervision tend to dislike escape hatches. They prefer doors with cameras, locks, and a man from the ministry who knows your uncle's address. This explains China's hard line on private cryptocurrency. The state has repeatedly restricted crypto trading, mining, and unauthorized virtual currency activity. Beijing wants the technology, but the state must remain the center of gravity. This is political clarity, not technological backwardness. The digital yuan, or ECNY, reflects that philosophy. Unlike private stablecoins, it does not represent a company's promise to redeem a token for fiat currency. It is state money in digital form, designed inside a controlled architecture. That architecture matters. A digital yuan can support domestic payments, reduce dependence on private payment platforms, improve policy visibility, and strengthen state command over payment channels. It may support financial inclusion and retail convenience. Depending on design, it can also create stronger state visibility into transactions. For Western observers, surveillance is often the first concern. That concern is warranted. A state-controlled digital currency can be designed with varying degrees of privacy, but political context decides what privacy means in practice. In a liberal legal order, financial privacy is contested through law, procedure, and institutional resistance. In China, privacy exists inside the boundaries permitted by the party state. That is a different creature. It may wear the same label, but the teeth are arranged differently. The deeper issue is whether CBDCs change the relationship between state authority and money. In the current banking system, most money used by the public is commercial bank money. Central bank money sits at the base, while ordinary users interact through banks, payment companies, cards, and digital wallets. A retail CBDC can bring the central bank closer to the user. That design can make payments faster, reduce settlement risk, simplify benefit delivery, and improve cross-border settlement. It can also alter the balance between citizen, bank, and state. Account-based systems differ from token-based systems. Commercial bank intermediation changes the control model. Offline functionality affects resilience. Programmability changes the state's reach into spending. Privacy choices decide whether digital money resembles cash, bank deposits, or a polite surveillance device with a logo. The code answers technical questions. The state answers who writes the code. In China's case, the political answer is clear. CBDC architecture must preserve sovereign command. The digital yuan is less a libertarian payment tool than a digital extension of the state's monetary nervous system. This sharply differs from the American stablecoin model. The American model, if it matures, will likely rely on regulated private issuers producing dollar-backed tokens under public rules. It is messy, market-driven, and full of disputes. Private firms build payment rails, then law drags the rails into supervision. From the outside, it looks chaotic because it is. American financial power has often arrived wearing mismatched socks. But the Chinese model is centralized. The state sets the architecture. Private platforms participate inside the permission structure. Digital money belongs to the sovereign. Both models have force. The American model scales through private adoption, global dollar trust, deep capital markets, and entrepreneurial software. The Chinese model coordinates domestic policy quickly, aligns banks and technology firms, and serves capital control objectives. Both models have weakness. America risks fragmentation and illicit use. China risks limited international trust. That last point matters most. A global currency is not merely issued, it is trusted. China can build excellent payment technology. Internationalizing the yuan requires more than rails. It requires trust in Chinese law, capital openness, institutional predictability, and political restraint. Beijing has little appetite for the kind of openness that would make the yuan a true rival to the dollar. It wants global use without surrendering domestic control. That is understandable. It is also the knot in the rope. China may not need the digital yuan to dethrone the dollar for it to matter. It can matter regionally, in trade corridors, in Belt and Road finance, in cross-border settlement experiments, and in sanctions-resistant bilateral exchange. A CBDC does not have to replace the dollar globally to reduce dollar dependence at the margins. A country that trades heavily with China may still use dollars for most global settlement, while welcoming alternatives for certain transactions. A digital yuan corridor combined with Chinese banks, trade platforms, commodity contracts, and tokenized settlement instruments could provide a partial hedge. Even modest volumes may carry strategic meaning if they weaken the assumption that all serious settlement must pass through Western-controlled infrastructure. Washington should avoid lazy comfort. The dollar remains dominant. China's capital controls limit yuan internationalization. The digital yuan has not conquered global finance. All true. Still, great power competition often turns on cumulative partial gains. A port here, a standards body there, a payment corridor somewhere else. One tile at a time, the mosaic forms. Blue, silver, magenta, and suddenly someone notices the dragon in the picture. China's interest in blockchain extends beyond the digital yuan. Controlled ledgers can help with supply chains, trade finance, data authentication, and industrial systems. These uses are less glamorous than speculative coins. They are also more likely to survive. The future of blockchain may involve fewer retail token fantasies and more boring firms using shared ledgers to reconcile claims. Conference vendors may suffer. Civilization will endure. For China, such systems support industrial policy. Blockchain-based platforms embedded in trade routes, customs processes, financing channels, and supply chains can increase Chinese influence over commercial data. They can also support standards that favor Chinese firms and Chinese governance models. Standards are power. Technical standards decide who can interoperate. Data standards decide what can be seen. Identity standards decide who can participate. Settlement standards decide which currency moves. Hong Kong gives China strategic flexibility. Mainland China can restrict private crypto, while Hong Kong experiments with regulated digital assets, licensing, and tokenization. The mainland preserves control. Hong Kong tests international-facing digital finance. Chinese firms gain experience. Foreign capital sees a familiar financial center. Regulators watch what works without letting the mainland retail population run into a speculative furnace with both arms open. A Taiwan contingency would sharpen these questions. If the United States and its allies imposed severe financial sanctions during a crisis, Beijing would need alternative channels for trade, commodity purchases, and partner settlement. China's scale makes crypto-based evasion far harder than Russian-style workarounds. You cannot hide an elephant behind a cafe curtain, especially when the elephant imports energy. Yet blockchain does not need to carry the whole economy to matter. It could support a broader resilience architecture involving yuan settlement, bilateral swaps, regional payment networks, sanctioned bank substitutes, offshore entities, CBDC corridors, and controlled digital assets. The strategic question is whether China can reduce the coercive power of the dollar system enough to make U.S. sanctions less decisive in crisis. The emerging comparison is clear. The United States has private stablecoin scale. China has sovereign CBDC coherence. America has global dollar trust. China has domestic control. America has deep capital markets. China has industrial coordination. No model is perfect. America can outcompete China if it turns private digital dollar adoption into regulated global infrastructure. China can gain ground if it embeds digital settlement into trade corridors where U.S. influence is weaker or where partners want alternatives. The likely result is a bifurcated digital money order. One sphere uses dollar stablecoins, tokenized treasuries, regulated exchanges, U.S.-linked custodians, and Western compliance logic. Another uses CBDC corridors, state-supervised tokenization, local currency settlement, Chinese platforms, and less exposure to Western sanctions. Many countries will hedge, combining dollar instruments for reserves and trade, Chinese systems for regional projects, local CBDCs for domestic policy, and crypto rails when convenient. The map will look less like a chessboard than a drawer full of cables that somehow powers a government ministry. Trust remains the hinge. Money is belief with a balance sheet. Digital money is belief with an API. Russia approaches blockchain from a different position altogether. Moscow is not trying to define the future of global finance from strength. It is trying to keep value moving under sanctions pressure. That changes the purpose of the technology. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia faced a widening Western sanctions regime aimed at banks, defense firms, oligarchs, energy flows, technology imports, shipping networks, and military procurement. Sanctions did not remove Russia from the world economy, but they made ordinary financial activity harder, slower, costlier, and riskier. That is what sanctions are designed to do. They raise friction, isolate targets, create reputational risk, and force counterparties to hesitate. Banks overcomply. Procurement becomes a maze of shell firms, coded invoices, false end users, and third-country intermediaries. Russia adapted because sanctioned states always adapt. Front companies, permissive jurisdictions, mislabeled goods, small banks, regional brokers, commodity traders, gray market networks, and alternative payment systems all become part of the survival architecture. Blockchain enters this world as another tool for moving value. It does not solve Russia's sanctions problem. It does not replace the dollar system at scale. It does not make a sanctioned economy invisible. What it can do is help specific actors settle transactions, move funds, launder proceeds, acquire technology, and work around traditional banking choke points. This is why the West has begun treating crypto infrastructure as part of the sanctions battle space. Procurement networks do not operate through one address and one exchange like a monk carrying a candle through a hallway. They use brokers, wallets, offshore firms, intermediaries, conversion services, OTC desks, stablecoins, banks, and shipment channels. To disrupt that system, enforcement has to move up the stack. Service providers, exchanges, wallet clusters, corporate entities, shipping records, intelligence holdings, and banking data all have to be connected. The old image of sanctions enforcement is a bank blocking a wire transfer. The new image is a blockchain analyst, customs investigator, cyber threat analyst, and sanctions lawyer staring at the same network from different angles, each seeing a different piece of the animal. The animal is usually uglier when assembled. Russia's crypto use has practical drivers. When banks lose Western channels, actors seek alternative ways to pay and receive funds. Crypto can move across borders without a traditional correspondent bank, which makes it attractive for smaller transactions, gray market trade, ransomware proceeds, procurement payments, and private capital movement. Dollar-like value without a U.S. bank is especially attractive. Dollar-backed stablecoins provide a digital dollar substitute that can circulate outside traditional bank accounts. For sanctioned actors, that is useful. For ordinary users in unstable economies, it is also useful. Tools rarely arrive wearing moral uniforms. Russia-linked cybercriminal ecosystems add another layer. Ransomware groups use crypto for payments, laundering, marketplace transactions, and infrastructure purchases. The overlap between criminal finance and state tolerance creates a permissive environment. Moscow may not control every ransomware crew, but it benefits from an ecosystem that imposes costs on adversaries, generates hard currency, and supplies technical talent. In conventional conflict, a state can use proxies. In cyber and illicit finance, it can also use tolerated criminal ecosystems. Blockchain becomes part of the payment plumbing. Here is the trap for Russia. Blockchain is not cash. Cash can be physically anonymous when handled carefully. Gold can move secretly outside formal channels. Hawala-style systems can settle through trust relationships with limited paperwork. Trade-based money laundering can hide value inside invoices, shipments, and pricing games. Public blockchains create records. Every transaction may be visible. Every wallet may preserve history. Even if a user is pseudonymous today, attribution tomorrow can expose yesterday's activity. That makes blockchain a weaponized ledger. It can help evade controls, but the same transparency can help enforce them. A Russian procurement actor may use stablecoins to pay a supplier. If the supplier deposits those tokens at an exchange, investigators may subpoena account data. If the wallet interacts with a sanctioned service, analytics firms may flag it. When the same wallet receives funds from a ransomware cluster, the intelligence value grows. A shipping record, email leak, phone number, domain registration, or customs filing can connect the financial trail to a real actor. The ledger becomes retrospective surveillance. That phrase should make bad actors sweat and honest citizens ask sharper design questions. Attribution rarely happens all at once. It accumulates. A wallet touches a known service. A broker reuses an address. A sanctioned exchange processes a pattern. A procurement firm appears in customs data. A telegram handle connects to an email. The email connects to a domain. The domain connects to a payment account. The payment account connects to an exchange. The exchange has records. Suddenly, the anonymous network has a name, an office, a cousin, and a sad chair in an interview room. Russia has explored state-backed digital money and alternative settlement mechanisms because sanctions exposed its vulnerability to Western-controlled infrastructure. A digital ruble could support domestic payments, government disbursements, and bilateral settlement with willing partners. Yet Russia faces a trust problem. A digital ruble is only as useful internationally as the network of counterparties willing to accept it. The ruble lacks the global liquidity, stability, and legal attractiveness of the dollar. A digital wrapper does not solve a weak monetary position. Putting a cracked vase on a faster truck does not make it porcelain. That is why stablecoins remain useful to Russian-linked actors. Even adversaries of the United States often want dollar exposure. That is the majesty of American financial power, and also its daily inconvenience. The enemy curses the dollar while reaching for it. History has a dry sense of humor. The defense industrial angle is direct. Modern warfare consumes technology at enormous speed. Missiles need sensors. Drones need chips. Radios need components. Machine tools need controllers. Navigation systems need specialized modules. A modern military supply chain is a cathedral of dual-use ambiguity, except the stained glass is made of export control paperwork. Sanctions aim to restrict Russia's access to dual-use technology. The difficulty is that dual-use goods are ambiguous by nature. A chip may go into industrial equipment or a drone. A sensor may support manufacturing or targeting. A communications module may serve civilian infrastructure or military platforms. This ambiguity gives procurement networks room to operate. Shell firms, third-country routing, false end users, small shipments, brokers, and weak enforcement jurisdictions become the furniture of the room. Payment is one strand in that web. Crypto can help when banks become cautious. A supplier who avoids direct Russian wires may accept payment from an intermediary. The intermediary may settle with crypto. Another broker may convert stablecoins into local currency. The payment chain becomes hard to parse because it runs alongside a trade chain designed to obscure military end use. Blockchain analysis should therefore be fused with export control intelligence. A wallet linked to a sanctioned Russian exchange becomes more meaningful when customs records show microelectronics shipments. A stablecoin transfer to a broker becomes more meaningful when corporate records connect that broker to defense procurement. A crypto service provider becomes more strategically important when its users overlap with ransomware, military suppliers, and sanctioned logistics networks. Blockchain data does not replace traditional intelligence. It adds a new layer to the map. In war, one extra layer can reveal the road everyone pretended did not exist. The cyber dimension deepens the picture. Ransomware depends on digital payment. Victims are often asked to pay in crypto. Criminal groups launder proceeds through mixers, exchanges, brokers, and cross-chain tools. Some groups operate from Russian-speaking spaces with varying degrees of state tolerance. That creates a national security feedback loop. Ransomware generates funds. Those funds support criminal infrastructure, which overlaps with hostile cyber ecosystems that provide talent, tools, access, and plausible deniability. Crypto rails help monetize intrusion. Blockchain enforcement is therefore part of cyber defense. When law enforcement seizes crypto infrastructure, sanctions a mixer, pressures an exchange, or traces ransomware payments, it attacks the business model of hostile cyber activity. A ransomware crew does not need ideological defeat. It needs bad margins. There is something wonderfully unpoetic about that. The Western challenge is that crypto enforcement cannot rely on domestic action alone. Sanctions evasion is international by design. If one exchange is compliant, bad actors seek another. If one jurisdiction tightens rules, activity moves to a looser one. If one stablecoin issuer freezes funds, actors switch routes. The answer is not to ban all digital assets. That would punish lawful uses and push activity deeper into opaque channels. The better answer is to make the regulated perimeter stronger, more interoperable, and more attractive than the illicit perimeter. Compliant exchanges must be able to operate. Stablecoin issuers need clear rules. Custodians must be secure. Analytics must be used responsibly. Law enforcement needs technical capacity. Regulators must distinguish serious firms from theatrical ones. Illicit finance does not wait for a committee report to find matching fonts. Scale matters here. Crypto cannot replace Russia's entire international financial requirement. Russia sells energy, imports industrial goods, finances a war, pays state employees, supports military production, and conducts trade at enormous scale. The required volume, liquidity, and counterparty network cannot simply migrate to public blockchains without creating visibility, volatility, and conversion problems. The right assessment is narrower. Crypto helps certain Russian actors reduce friction at the margins. A sanctioned drone importer does not need to move the whole Russian economy. He needs to pay a broker. A ransomware affiliate does not need to finance Gazprom. He needs to cash out. A procurement network does not need to replace SWIFT. It needs enough value to move through enough cutouts to buy enough parts. Gray zone systems do not need to replace the main system. They need to be effective enough to undermine specific policy objectives. Sanctions are not a guillotine. They are a vice, and the vice tightens through detail. The weaponized ledger also raises a civil liberties issue. Public ledger analytics can help track criminals, sanctioned actors, ransomware gangs, and procurement networks. The same tools can create powerful surveillance capabilities. If transactions are traceable and identity systems become tied to wallets, financial privacy may erode. Free societies need limits. The same tools used to track Russian procurement networks could be misused against lawful political activity, donations, purchases, or association patterns. Freezing powers used against sanctioned actors could be abused without safeguards. Analytics that expose ransomware could produce overbroad risk scoring for ordinary users. The West should not defeat authoritarian financial control by building a softer domestic version with better branding. A serious democratic system needs warrants, due process, statutory limits, auditability, minimization rules, and ways to contest wrongful designations. Financial intelligence is necessary. Financial omniscience is dangerous. There is no greatness in building a panopticon and calling it compliance. That restraint is also a strategic advantage. If the United States and its allies build digital asset infrastructure that enforces law while preserving lawful privacy better than China does, they gain legitimacy. Trust is adoption fuel. People use systems they trust. Firms build on systems they trust. Allies align with systems they trust. Russia shows the threat. China shows the control model. America has to show the trust model. Now we move to the stakeholder roundtables. For defense leaders, blockchain should be understood as financial terrain connected to cyber, procurement, sanctions, and intelligence. It is not investment trivia. It is a new layer of value movement that adversaries can use and analysts can exploit. Every conflict has a financial architecture. Armies need procurement. Proxies need funding. Sanctioned regimes need workarounds. Ransomware groups need laundering. Defense industrial supply chains need payment. Illicit brokers need settlement. When blockchain becomes part of that architecture, defense organizations need operational literacy. That literacy is not coin trading. It is the ability to understand how adversaries move value through wallets, exchanges, stablecoins, bridges, and brokers. It includes the way ransomware finance supports hostile cyber activity, the way stablecoins move through gray markets, and the way digital asset flows can become one layer in a larger intelligence picture involving trade data, corporate records, shipping routes, cyber indicators, export control violations, and human networks. A future sanctions evasion case may involve a shell company, a shipping broker, a stablecoin transfer, a telegram intermediary, a dual-use component, and an end-user certificate lying with the confidence of a man wearing too much cologne. That is not a crypto story. It is a national security story. Defense leaders should also treat blockchain infrastructure as part of the cyber target environment. Exchanges, custodians, wallets, bridges, smart contracts, validators, cloud services, and key management systems all create attack surfaces. A compromised custodian may produce strategic financial loss. A breached exchange may expose intelligence-relevant data. A hacked bridge may fund hostile actors. Digital asset infrastructure now belongs inside threat models. The core requirement is fusion. Blockchain analysis should not sit in a novelty corner with a beanbag chair and a dashboard. It belongs next to cyber threat intelligence, sanctions enforcement, export control analysis, and supply chain monitoring. For commercial executives, the message is sharper than the market chatter suggests. Blockchain is moving from speculative frenzy toward regulated infrastructure. Speculation will not disappear. Speculation is harder to kill than glitter in a carpet. Yet serious institutional money is moving toward stablecoins, tokenized assets, custody, compliance tooling, analytics, settlement systems, and secure institutional workflows. The firms that win will understand law, security, and market structure. The firms that lose will mistake decentralization for legal immunity. A company entering this space needs practical answers before touching customer money. Jurisdiction has to be clear. Custody has to be secure. Redemption rights have to be defined. Reserves must be verifiable. Identity controls need to fit the use case. Sanction screening cannot be decorative. Smart contract risk needs review. Incident response must be rehearsed. The blockchain may be distributed, but accountability cannot be. Commercial leaders should also watch tokenization closely. Tokenized treasuries, tokenized money market funds, tokenized collateral, and digital settlement systems may become infrastructure for institutional finance. Firms that understand regulated tokenization could gain advantage in payments, treasury management, collateral mobility, and cross-border settlement. The customer will not care that a system is on-chain if redemption fails, the key is lost, the smart contract breaks, or the legal claim evaporates. Trust remains the product. The ledger is the delivery mechanism. For policymakers, blockchain demands a strategic doctrine. The United States cannot afford permissive chaos or bureaucratic strangulation. A serious approach would bring credible digital asset activity under law while preserving the advantages of openness, private enterprise, dollar reach, and lawful privacy. Stablecoins sit at the center of that doctrine. A fully reserved, well-regulated dollar stablecoin system could extend American monetary power. It could strengthen demand for treasuries, support dollar liquidity in digital markets, compete with foreign CBDC corridors, and preserve sanctions reach through accountable issuers and exchanges. But poorly regulated stablecoins could recreate shadow banking risks, offshore enforcement gaps, consumer losses, and systemic fragility. Policy has to distinguish between different instruments. A fully reserved payment stablecoin, an algorithmic token, and a tokenized treasury fund do not belong in the same regulatory bucket. A decentralized exchange interface differs from a bank, though access points may still need governance. Precision matters. When law uses a shovel where it needs tweezers, everyone gets dirt in the gears. Central bank digital currencies require a separate debate. The United States may not need a retail CBDC to compete with China if regulated dollar stablecoins and tokenized treasuries can carry dollar liquidity through private channels. Wholesale CBDC research may still matter for interbank settlement, cross-border corridors, and future financial architecture. The question should not be ideological theater. It should be design, purpose, privacy, resilience, and geopolitical effect. Privacy deserves serious treatment. Western digital finance should avoid becoming authoritarian control with better fonts. Lawful enforcement can coexist with privacy safeguards, but those safeguards need to be built early. Once surveillance architecture hardens, reform becomes a museum tour of regret. Allied coordination is another requirement. Digital money will not respect borders. The United States should work with allies on stablecoin standards, custody rules, market supervision, sanctions enforcement, blockchain analytics, cyber controls, and tokenized asset law. Rival systems will grow in the gaps between allied rules. Adversaries love gaps. They move into them like raccoons into a cathedral attic. The policy objective should be clear enough to survive contact with bureaucracy. The West needs a trusted digital dollar ecosystem under law, with lawful privacy, hardened infrastructure, tokenized markets, and higher costs for illicit use. That is how the West competes with China's control model and Russia's evasion model. So what comes next? The strategic forecast points toward a fractured digital money order. Regulated stablecoins will consolidate. Dollar-backed tokens will remain central to digital asset markets because the dollar remains the world's preferred settlement reference. The real battle will be over who issues them, how reserves are held, which jurisdictions govern them, and how compliance is enforced. Stablecoins that satisfy institutional standards will gain power. Weak instruments will either shrink, migrate offshore, or become recurring cautionary tales with expensive lawyers. Tokenized collateral will gain importance. Tokenized treasuries, money market funds, and other high-quality assets may become the foundation of institutional blockchain finance. Their importance will come from usefulness rather than glamour. Yield, collateral mobility, and settlement options matter more than marketing. Boring assets may become the aristocracy of the ledger. Somewhere, a meme coin will feel underdressed. CBDC divergence will continue. China will pursue sovereign digital money and controlled settlement channels. Other states will explore CBDCs for domestic payments, wholesale settlement, or cross-border use. The United States will likely remain cautious on retail CBDC while relying more heavily on private stablecoins and tokenized dollar assets. Competing models will coexist: state-controlled digital money, private regulated digital money, and hybrid systems built for specific corridors. Sanctions-aware infrastructure will become normal. Exchanges, custodians, wallet providers, stablecoin issuers, and analytics firms will be drawn more deeply into sanctions enforcement. Digital asset firms that want institutional legitimacy will need strong controls. Those that avoid compliance will attract illicit flows, then enforcement pressure, then the familiar sound of doors opening at inconvenient hours. Intelligence fusion will separate serious states from unserious ones. Blockchain analysis will merge with cyber threat intelligence, export control monitoring, corporate record analysis, shipping data, and sanctions investigations. Capable governments will treat the ledger as one sensor among many. Those that keep blockchain expertise isolated will miss the network. Middle powers will hedge. Countries will use dollar stablecoins, local CBDCs, Chinese settlement systems, regional payment networks, and traditional banking in varied combinations. Most will avoid choosing one block cleanly. Hedging is what states do when great powers start rearranging the furniture. Through all of this, the core issue remains power. Blockchain changes how value can move. It changes who can see movement. It changes how assets can be represented, transferred, and controlled. Old choke points weaken while new ones appear. States gain tools, adversaries find routes, and technical literacy becomes a strategic advantage. The crypto dream of escaping politics was always naive. Money is political because trust is political. Settlement is political because finality is political. Custody is political because control is political. Privacy is political because visibility is power. Sanctions are political because exclusion is power wearing a legal suit. Blockchain does not end these realities. It digitizes them. The United States enters this contest with enormous advantages. the dollar, deep markets, technological talent, legal institutions, analytics firms, and allied reach. Its weakness is disorder. China enters with state capacity, policy coherence, and a clear control model. Its weakness is trust. Russia enters under pressure, using blockchain as an evasion tool and threat model generator. Its weakness is scale and legitimacy. The winner will not be the country with the loudest blockchain rhetoric. It will be the country or bloc that makes digital value movement trusted, lawful, secure, liquid, interoperable, and strategically useful. For America and its allies, the path is difficult but visible. Build regulated dollar stablecoins. Support tokenized high-quality assets. Preserve lawful privacy. Harden custody. Integrate analytics into national security. Coordinate with allies. Keep serious firms onshore. Make illicit finance expensive. Compete with authoritarian systems by offering trust rather than control. That is the strategic center. The future of blockchain will not be decided by slogans about decentralization or speeches about sovereignty. It will be decided by reserve accounts, custody rules, sanctions lists, smart contract audits, legal claims, exchange records, intelligence fusion, and the quiet habits of institutions that either earn trust or squander it. A ledger records, but a state governs. Markets choose among systems that appear safe enough to use. Adversaries probe whatever seams they can find. A serious civilization learns how those forces interact before the crisis arrives. The new financial battle space will not look like a battlefield. It will look like wallets, APIs, exchanges, custodians, compliance dashboards, tokenized funds, central bank pilots, shell firms, and invoices that say industrial sensor package. That is how modern power often appears at first: boring, technical, deniable, and easy to ignore. Then the money moves, the parts ship, the missile flies. Only afterward does everyone admit that the ledger was never boring at all. This has been Orbital Estimate. End transmission.